Somewhere along the way, we all thought we should not do things that we aren't good at. And today, I want to talk about, one, I'm gonna show you how I make clay at home for fun with no judgment. And two, we are gonna go over how finding joy in the little things that we don't necessarily have to be amazing at. My fun piece of joy in my life that I took up over the years is clay. And let me just start and premise with, I originally wanted to learn clay on the wheel. And when I bought a wheel and I bought the clay, it sat in my house for 2 years because I was afraid to start because I didn't feel like I was good at it. I was trying to do clay not because I wanted to create a job out of it. I wanted to do things that brought me more joy, and I love creativity, but I do creativity for my job, like content creation and creating recipes and all these types of things, but at the end of the day, these are things that I do for my job. So I wanted to find a creative outlet that allowed me to be creative, but be more meditative, and a hobby that brings me joy versus something that I feel is something I have to do for a job. Even though, don't get me wrong, I love my job, I love being creative. It's why I do what I do, but this is a little bit different. So the first thing I want to talk about, as I also explain what I'm doing, is the pressure to be productive is stealing our joy. For those of you who don't know me, I am an American who lives in Italy, and I grew up in cities my entire life. And productivity was like the number one thing that I felt I needed to do to have respect, to have success, to basically drill myself and all my happiness into the ground, because that's what I feel like we had to do. And so let's talk about how we got to this mindset. In our childhood, we typically get awarded on achievements, not doing things that bring us joy. Social media encourages performance over presence. My ultimate favorite is rest feels unproductive, like you're just not doing enough. So, a little explanation. I started with this little ball of clay. This is usually how I like to start it. I hit the clay into a ball, so this kind of gets all of the air bubbles out, which is super important. And also for premise, I'm using clay that you need to fire, but you can also use clay that is air dry clay and it be more decorative pieces. I have an Amazon storefront to all of those things that you can buy, including a mat like this and utensils, so I will link that in the description if you feel like joining me in my clay creations. This clay needs to be fired, so I hit all of the air bubbles out of it. And then we're going to start with a little practice here. And this is where, in my wellness retreats that I host, we typically always do a clay ceramics class because, one, it's, of course, a beautiful outlet of joy and meditative and creativity, but I also love to do this practice that I learned at a retreat that I embodied and loved so much, which is removing judgment from our experience. So we always think in our minds, like, I want this ball to be a bowl or a mug or a cup or whatever. And then what you realize is when you try to focus on making it something that you, in your mind, want it to be, it typically doesn't end up being that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but we're being judgmental of the clay and we're being judgmental of ourselves. So before I explain anything to the women at my wellness retreat, I ask them to just close their eyes and take the ball and start to form a bowl. Just like what they think that would start to look like, not looking at it at all, just like slowly pinching around, feeling the cup or the bowl, and just kind of letting it form into itself the way that your mind and fingers are imagining versus your eyes, which come from judgment. And I like to do this for a couple of minutes, just give it a little bit of time to kind of feel around the clay and form whatever you feel like you're forming, and completely be from a place of non-judgment with our eyes. And then I let them open their eyes and see what they've made. And then I have them put it aside. And then we start over again and try to make the same thing, but with our eyes open, and see how different the clay fixtures are between looking at it with your eyes with judgment and feeling it just with your fingertips and your mind with judgment. And this is a beautiful practice because you realize how things, when you judge them more, typically have resistance. As you can see, I started to kind of form this cup-like fixture. This is a hand building clay class. There's also, of course, pottery wheels, which I feel like are more famous. When I learned how to do hand building and do clay like this, it opened my mind to how I was just creating a block that basically didn't exist because I was too afraid to just start with touching the clay. But as soon as I realized how simple it is to start making something out of clay, I never stopped. And yes, I learned how to do the pottery wheel because I also think it's a beautiful thing to learn, but I actually prefer to do hand building over the pottery wheel. So that being said, I want to teach you how I just did this shape so that if you're interested in building a mug or a bowl from hand building, you can at least do it at home. So what clay has taught me is so many things, but why clay has basically been a mirror, because clay resists control. It cracks and dries and kind of does whatever it wants unless you really nurture it. So, sound familiar? I don't know, maybe. It teaches patience and presence. So sometimes a project takes me 1 hour and sometimes a project takes me a couple days. And typically what I thought I was making originally is something completely different than what I end up making. You can't force it to be perfect, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Is you have to be open-minded and just allow it to be whatever it wants to be without judgment. When you let go of expectations, you really enjoy the process. So it's like, do you want to be put in a cage? I don't want to be put in a cage, so don't put the clay in the cage. Just let it be who it wants to be. So you want to form a ball as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then you want to find the center of the ball, and then you want to push a hole with your thumb or your index finger. I like to use my thumb. So it makes a little hole like so. Then you kind of want to pinch your thumb like this into the hole while you rotate it to start to make the hole deeper and also a little bit wider. And as you're kind of pinching around this ball, you want to try and feel out the evenness of the thickness of the walls and kind of continue to push around to keep it as even as possible. What I like to do too is when I kind of push my thumb like this, it creates more of an arched inside, and this allows you to either put it out into a bowl or you can start to build it up into a cup. So you just want to keep going like that and don't go too far deep where you have no room at the bottom, because that's something that easily happens. And then once you feel like you have a really good hollow inside, then this is where you want to kind of decide which direction you want to go in. Again, no judgment, because who knows when it wants to be. And you can flatten the bottom, push it down a little bit, and then you can essentially start to pinch it upwards or pinch it out or pull it out. If you want to make a plate, you just kind of have to keep feeling it and moving it until it starts to create something that you want. So I'm gonna try and go for a large mug here, but it might turn into a bowl. I don't know, usually it does, unless I really try to make it into a cup. But now you can see that it's becoming a little bit more hollow in the inside. And I'm just continuing to feel and pinch the sides of the clay, if you can see here. And this is how I will just kind of keep building it and moving it up, or if you want to move it out, or if you want to make it bigger, you can kind of stretch it and make it into a bowl. And so I'll just kind of keep going upwards for now until I decide what I want to do. I'm also going to push down the bottom to make it a little bit more flat versus round. So I'm a girly who has suffered with underlying anxiety for a very long time, since I was a child, which I had no idea, of course, because I feel like anxiety wasn't really spoken in my era of being a child. And even in my adult life, I didn't know I had underlying anxiety either. I felt like I was just a really hard worker, and I was trying to essentially run away from my anxiety by doing more versus sitting with my anxiety and understanding how I could improve it. And through working with clay and finding hobbies, like even for me, gardening and different hobbies that I've found over the years, especially after moving to Italy and being in stillness and having that balance, I have realized and recognized how much it really improves my nervous system and regulates my stress hormone, because at the end of the day, we all have stressors, and life, that's the way of life, right? We have work and we have personal life and we have all these different things that bring stress. And it's not about eliminating stressors in our life, although I'm sure there's plenty of things we can eliminate that are stressors in our lives, but at some point it's going to come to us regardless of how much we change. And it's about knowing and having the tools in our toolbox to help us regulate our nervous system and help us alleviate the stress in our lives so that our stress response isn't so extreme that it actually causes issues in our body. So working with your hands and working with clay, like for me, this is so meditative, especially when you come from a place of non-judgment and you just let it be fun and creative. And I know for me, like when I'm feeling extra stressed, that's when I know I need to work with clay even more, because how nice to find something that isn't just like doing a meditation or, whatever everyone else tells you, breath work to calm your nervous system. Although those things are really great and I do use them, I feel that this is something where you don't even really know that you're fixing your nervous system, yet you're doing it. And I feel like that's where you really hit a sweet spot of finding joy and less stress in your life. So even if clay isn't your hobby, you can do something like cooking or gardening or painting or, I feel like there's a million ways that you can be creative. And why I feel like these types of hobbies really do work with our nervous system well as well is because when we become adults, we disconnect from our childlike wonder. And when we're children, we love being creative and we love doing art and we love making clay and drawing and all these different things and playing with toys, and we lose that sense of ourselves. It's not childish to do things that children like to do. It's actually amazing for our soul to tap into that side of ourselves and be childlike. That's how you stay young forever, energetically and yourself. Sometimes, of course, you don't feel like doing childish things. I've definitely gone through phases of my life where I feel like I was like the Grinch almost. I didn't want to do anything fun because I just wasn't feeling it, and that's okay too. But when you get to the other side of wanting to be more playful in your life, hobbies and creativity is one of the best ways that you can connect to your childlike wonder again. And I know for me, I disconnected from my inner child because I had to survive my childhood. And so you disconnect because you're in survival, so you don't really have a connectivity to that childlike wonder. And I felt it as an adult a lot. And it wasn't until I really deep dove into inner child work and realized that playing like a kid and doing arts and crafts like kids is really a beautiful way to reconnect to our inner child again. And so it doesn't have to be clay, but whatever it may be for you, I really encourage you to try any of these types of creative habits that can really help regulate the nervous system and also just connect you to your childlike wonder again. This could be a bowl or a cup. This is either a very large mug, which by the way, I love large mugs because like the more tea, the better now. But this could also be a matcha bowl. So we'll just keep letting it build and then we'll decide what it wants to be. So for clay work also, I always have water and a sponge and some specific utensils because you don't want the clay to get dry. And this also helps with smoothing out edges, and then I like to use utensils like these, and then you can kind of work with the different ways you want to work the clay, making it more smooth, keeping it really natural and bumpy. And then of course I have some other utensils here where we can actually draw different marks or whatever it may be into the clay. So I like to do this just to see and feel where I'm at with the walls of whatever I'm trying to make, because when you're on the wheel, you can get the walls to be much more even because you're working with spinning at the same time. But here, because we're working with pinching and pulling upwards, you can have a lot of uneven walls. But I personally love kind of this raw, natural looking. Nothing is perfect in life, you know? So the clay doesn't need to be perfect either. So another thing I would love to talk about too is you're allowed to be a beginner forever. A beginner at so many things. I feel like I lean into new things and not being an expert all the time, because at the end of the day, that's how we learn and evolve. And it's the same thing with ceramics. Do I think I'm gonna become a professional ceramicist? Like, I don't think so. But if I do, maybe when I'm much older or whatever it may be, and I'm fine being a beginner for like the whole part of my life and just kind of either get fancy with it or stay super basic. And I think that that is the beauty of life is, yes, we can become specialists or experts in things that we love. And I think that that's great, but don't be afraid of becoming a beginner again and starting over fresh. Let's say I was not always the best at this, especially when I was going through stressful, very hard times when I feel like you actually need to prioritize that the most. So I want to talk about some tips and how we can do that and make space for ourselves to do more things that bring us joy. And I'm going to start with the importance of that, because I don't know if you guys watched my YouTube about inner radiance, but when you radiate a specific energy and aura within yourself, which is energetic, this is not how you look, you attract abundance and joy into your life more because it's an essence of which you radiate. Like attracts like, right? So when you're dense and there's no joy and you're just frustrated or you have anxiety or all these things, of course you're going to attract more of those things into your life. But when you make time for joy and things that make you happy and peaceful and calm nervous system, this is where more abundance and love and joy comes into your life, because it's something that you're making effort to have in your life energetically, which means you will be brought more of it. And it doesn't mean that you're gonna be brought more joyful ceramics. It means more joy in love, more, abundance coming your way, different job opportunities. There's so many ways that joy and abundance can come forward. And another thing to remember is that joy is the highest frequency, and it's the same frequency of love and abundance. So the more joy you have in life, the more abundance and money and love you will have in your life when you prioritize it. Just as much as you prioritize your job, you should try and fit in things that bring you joy too. And by the way, communication is key. Communicate to your family members, get your kids involved, have your partner join you, or if it's not something he loves, like let him support you in something that really brings you joy, and communicate how much it brings you joy. And do it anyway if they're resistant. Prioritize yourself, that's the most important, and find the thing that brings you the most joy. So I want to leave you guys with this. Let joy be enough. You don't need to perform joy. You just need to make time for it. Joy is so valuable even if nobody sees it. You don't need to scream to the world that you're doing more joy. This is something that is a space for you to embody on your own and know that you're giving it to your soul. And if it ends up, turning into something else, or you bring your friends, like I love when my family comes to visit me, like I have them all do ceramics with me because it brings me so much joy, and then it brings them so much joy without them even realizing it. But you don't have to share it, just keep it to yourself and know that that joy is within you. And that's the most important thing, is making sure you have that joy. Also, if you have something popping up in your mind right now that is, oh, I remember this used to bring me joy, reclaim that. Go back and see if that is something that still brings you joy. And if it doesn't, then explore other options like me, where I just had this thought about clay and it worked. I loved it. It took me years to actually embody it. But once I did, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. Now, I want you to think, where in your life are you still trying to be perfect? And I invite you to finally just let it go. Be free of the anxiety that it brings, or the overthinking, or whatever it may be. Perfectionism is a love-hate relationship. I definitely suffered with it for many years, and as I look at this, I want you to think, where in your life are you still trying to be perfect? And I invite you to finally just let it go. Be free of the anxiety that it brings, or the overthinking, or whatever it may be. Perfectionism is a love-hate relationship. I definitely suffered with it for many years, and as I look at this, beautiful, not so perfect. There's a lot of little rigid edges and nothing is to perfection as maybe it would be if it was manufactured. I love that it's not perfect. And I also love my life that it's not perfect. And maybe from the outside it may seem perfect, but let me tell you, it is far from it. And that is the beauty. The beauty is in the imperfection. The beauty is finding more joy in the imperfection, and also just bringing more joy into our lives in general so that we can have calm nervous systems, more joy-like wonder, childlike wonder, and just enjoy life more. If that question stirs anything inside of you, I have an online community called Shayna Serene Circle where we have like-minded wellness, health, spirituality girlies all in one place, where I, of course, lead every month a different theme. I have meditations, we have journaling prompts, we do lives together, we do ceramics together, we drink tea together. It's a community of like-minded women where you feel like you have a space to be safe and evolve in whatever which way that means for you. I even have recipes in there for gut health and nutrition. So feel free to chime in. It's 3 days free trial, so you can pop in and see if you like it. I would love to see you there, and I will put the link in the description. Thank you so much for joining me in my cute little ceramics and just talking about how we can do creativity and joy. I will see you in the next YouTube.